Some men don't get killed by bullets. They fade from the inside out, from silence that grows heavy, from all the things they should have shouted but swallowed instead. Eli Mercer was one of those men. Once he had a life that meant something, a wife, a small spread of land, a place that felt his. Then one morning she was gone, buried out back under a crooked cross and a sky that didn't seem to care. The world didn't stop for him. It never does. He spent his days fixing fences that never stayed fixed and pretending he didn't notice how quiet the ranch had become. That morning, he wasn't looking for anything, just another chore waiting to be done, until he saw it. A burlap sack, hanging uneven under a cottonwood tree, rocking gently in the breeze. Most men would have ignored it. Out here, curiosity can get you killed. But something about it felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. Eli rode closer, reins tight, squinting under the brim of his hat. The sack wasn't tied shut, more like tossed and caught halfway. Torn burlap, dirt-stained, and near the bottom, dark patches that weren't just mud. Then he heard it. A sound faint as a dying wind. Not a cry, not a scream, just breathing. Weak. Human. He dismounted slow, careful, like the ground might shatter beneath him. The sack shifted. Inside was a woman, young, maybe mid-20s. Her dress was ripped to ribbons, her skin blistered from sun and thirst. One wrist was still tangled in rusted wire. She didn't plead or cry, she just whispered, voice cracked and steady. "Make it quick." Eli froze. Then knelt beside her, pulled the cloth away, and what he saw twisted his stomach. Not because of blood, but because whoever did this wanted her erased. Not dead, just forgotten. He untied the wire, lifted her slow, and carried her toward the horse. For the first time in a long while, Eli Mercer didn't know what to do, but he knew what not to do. He wasn't about to leave her hanging there. Some things you ride past once, and they haunt you forever. Eli's ranch wasn't much. A roof that groaned when the wind came down from the ridge, a porch that leaned like it was tired of standing, and two empty chairs that hadn't felt company in years. But for her, it was the closest thing to safety the world had left. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask where she came from or who she was running from. Questions like that just scared off answers anyway. He brought her inside, left a blanket by the stove, and said only one thing: "You're safe here, for now." She didn't take the bed. She curled up on the floor beside the heat like someone who didn't trust softness anymore. When the kettle hissed, she flinched. When the wind hit the windows, she looked at the door like she expected it to break open any second. Most days she barely spoke, drank what he poured, nibbled at the bread like she had to test it first. But she stayed. That counted for more than he'd admit. Eli kept a routine, fixing fences, hauling feed, patching roofs that didn't want to hold nails. He didn't press, didn't comfort, just made sure there was food on the table and water by the fire. Sometimes quiet can speak clearer than words. A week passed before something shifted. One morning while Eli was splitting wood behind the barn, she stepped outside. Her hair tied back with a strip of torn cloth, her shoulders straight but trembling, like she was teaching her body to remember what standing tall felt like. She didn't say anything, just grabbed a log and set it upright. He didn't stop her. They worked in silence, side by side. Two broken people pretending they weren't. That night, while the fire cracked low, she whispered, without looking up, "You didn't touch me." Eli stopped, hand still on the tin cup. He didn't answer, just met her eyes. She gave one small nod, then finished every bite on her plate. And for the first time, she smiled. It was faint, unsure, but real. Sometimes trust doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up one quiet night at a time. Peace doesn't last long out here. It never does. A week after that first smile, Eli noticed something strange by the south fence line. Hoof prints. Deep ones. Fresh. Not his, and not from town either. Whoever left them rode heavy and didn't care to hide it. He didn't mention it to her, just tightened the gate hinges, checked the rifle, and rode the fence twice that day. When he came back, she was sitting closer to the fire than usual. Slept bad, she said. Felt like someone was out there. Eli nodded, but said nothing. Later that night, while she was rinsing her hands by the basin, he caught sight of something on her wrist. A mark burned into the skin, not a scar, not fresh, but carved deep and deliberate. 3 letters, rough and crooked. JKS. He'd seen that before, years back, on a mean drunk outside a mining camp near Copper Ridge. A man who bragged about things that didn't belong in daylight. Eli had turned away then, pretending it wasn't his business. But now that same mark was burned into her skin, and that made it his business whether he wanted it or not. He didn't sleep that night, just sat by the window, oil lamp low, rifle resting across his knees. Dawn came cold and gray, and by the time the rooster crowed, Eli Mercer already knew where he was going. He saddled up and headed toward Dry Creek, the nearest town where news still traveled slower than trouble. Some ghosts don't rattle chains. They leave hoofprints in your yard and dare you to follow. Dry Creek looked the same as it always did. Dust, smoke, and men pretended not to notice each other. Eli tied up outside the saloon but didn't go in for a drink. He wasn't there to talk. He was there to listen. Word travels funny in small towns. You don't need to ask. You just need to sit still long enough for someone else to start running their mouth. By noon, he'd heard enough to make his stomach knot. 3 young women missing in the last few months, 2 from Texas Hollow, 1 from Santa Fe Trail. All under 25, all vanished without a sound. No ransom, no witnesses, no follow-up. Sheriff called it bad luck and told folks not to stir up panic. Eli thanked him for his time, tipped his hat, and rode out like he had nothing on his mind. But inside, something had cracked. This wasn't about law or pride anymore. This was about her, the woman asleep by his stove, still flinching when the wind blew too hard. That night, under the yellow flicker of a lamp, she finally asked, "Why'd you ride into town?" Eli didn't look up, just kept cleaning the barrel of his rifle, slow and steady. Because some men need to know someone's still watching. She reached out, her hand brushing his just once. It was small, quick, but enough. In that single touch, he knew this wasn't just her second chance, it was his too. Justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it rides in quiet and leaves before dawn. Eli didn't storm in like the heroes from old dime novels. He moved like a shadow, steady, quiet, and sure of what needed doing. He rode through Dry Creek beds where only coyotes left tracks, and by the time the sun began to sink, he found the place. A shack leaned crooked against a cliff, smoke slipping from a cracked chimney. Laughter spilled out between the boards, rough voices, ugly and familiar. He tied his horse behind a patch of mesquite and circled around, waiting for the right kind of silence. When the bottle clinked for the 3rd time, he kicked the door open. The first man rose fast and caught the butt of Eli's rifle square in the chest. The second reached for his belt, but Eli fired once, straight through the lantern. The glass exploded and the room went dark but for the glow of the coals. The third man froze mid-step, knife trembling in his hand. He dropped it before Eli even spoke. In the corner, huddled beneath a torn quilt, was another girl, barely more than a child, her eyes wide and hollow. Eli knelt, wrapped his coat around her shoulders, and guided her toward the door. Before leaving, he turned to the men, voice low and even. "She's not yours. None of them are. And if I hear you touch another girl again, I won't knock first next time." He took the girl back to Dry Creek. The sheriff looked ready to make excuses, but Eli dropped a broken knife and a blood-stained dress on his desk. That was enough. This time, the law finally remembered what it was for. When he returned home, she was waiting by the gate. She didn't ask what happened, didn't cry, just met his eyes like she already knew. And for the first time in a long while, Eli Mercer felt something other than emptiness. He felt right. Some reckon revenge brings peace, but the truth is, it just makes room for something better. It wasn't a love story, not the kind you find in paperbacks stacked by the general store counter, but it was something. She stayed, not because she owed him, but because she chose to. Days started to stretch softer. She began tending a small patch behind the barn, planting herbs she said her grandmother once grew. She brushed the horses without flinching now, and sometimes, when she thought Eli wasn't listening, she hummed. He didn't say a word about it. Some moments lose their meaning if you talk them to death. He still fixed fences, still rose before dawn, but there was a second cup on the table every morning. A pair of smaller boots left by the door that weren't his. She slept in the room across the hall, and that was enough. Some nights they sat under the stars with coffee that had gone cold, neither one saying a thing. But the quiet between them wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like rest. One evening, as the sky faded red over the hills, she asked, "Why'd you come back for me?" Eli thought for a long while, thumb tracing the rim of his cup. "Because someone had to," he said finally. She nodded once, like that answer made sense to her bones. Life doesn't always hand you what you deserve. Sometimes it hands you someone who sees that you deserved better all along. And that can change everything. Eli never asked her to stay, and she never promised she would. But each dawn, she opened the door. Each dusk, she came home. Love doesn't always blaze like wildfire. Sometimes it moves quiet, like rain on old wood, like forgiveness, like starting over. So tell me, if someone knocked on your door tomorrow, needing more than just a place to sleep, would you let them in, or pretend you didn't hear the knock?